So, one of the things that's recently become very problematic is words. Um, we seem to have this new habit of just beating everybody over the head with a word until it loses all meaning. And it's another phenomenon, like so many others, that's just been accelerating more rapidly as time goes on. Um, the long list of words that no longer mean anything include grassroots, means nothing. Organic, means nothing. Praxis means nothing. Like, we've just beaten these words into the ground and we've just overused them to the point where we just attribute everything we want to them. And it becomes problematic because then a word loses all meaning. And then when you actually go to use the word in its actual context, um, people don't view it as potent or valid because everything is that thing. Good example. Everybody on the right is now convinced that everything they don't like is either socialism or communism, even though they don't actually know what either of those two systems are. They just yell, "That's socialism!" It's a thing. The left is just as guilty of this. Everything they don't like is fascism, and everybody they don't like is Hitler. This has been a constant thing also. So I thought, since, Trump is sitting up here putting out some wacky stuff and the left keeps screaming about it, I thought we would take a look at what fascism actually is. So maybe I'll stop calling everything fascism. Also, is Donald Trump actually a fascist? Yeah. So let's do that. What do you think? Let's click the magic button here. So, definition of fascism. Fascism is a form of far-right authoritarian ultranationalism characterized by dictatorial power, forcible suppression of opposition, as well as strong regimentation of society and of the economy. So fascism requires the push for more government power, all of it being consolidated into a single party group or ideology, and then that ideology being forcefully pushed throughout the nation, and then from the nation out to its neighbors. There are a lot of things that accompany fascism, but fascism requires at least those things. So, for example, when there's a bunch of, quote, patriots shutting down a state office, and they're all out there armed, with assault rifles and body armor, and people go, "Oh, look at you, you're a bunch of fascists." They're not fascists. They might be authoritarian, they might be threatening, but that's not fascism. Now, many of them might have fascist tendencies, and many of those events might help feed into to other fascist plans and ideas, but technically not fascism, because it's not requiring the threat or use of government force. Now, you can make the case that they're in cahoots with the government because either they pull a permit, which is, the government giving you consent, or they don't, the police don't go out of their way to stop those protests. But again, that alignment does not necessarily make it fascism. So, not fascism. However, is Donald Trump fascist? And is he pushing fascism? And does he even realize he's pushing fascism? So, I got a little ditty here. Last week, police officers across the country deployed brutal tactics in response to protests over the killing of George Floyd. The former Secretary of Labor, Robert Reich, announced his old vocabulary, crowded already with harsh words for President Trump, is making way for a new edition. "I have held off using the F word for 3.5 years, but there's no longer any honest alternative. Trump is a fascist and he is promoting fascism in America." Now, let's keep in mind, Robert Reich did work for the Clinton administration. So not exactly a nonpartisan source, but Reich wasn't alone. Journalist Masha Gessen was also a skeptic and had just published a book called Surviving Autocracy, which lists fascism among the words that gets thrown about in the American political conversation without sufficient precision, kind of like what I'm talking about. She wrote a short essay for The New Yorker commenting on what it meant when the president, enamored already of military parades and masked men in combat attire, told governors to crack down on protesters, quote, "Whether or not he is capable of grasping the concept, Trump is performing fascism." It was a notable term. The word fascism is so loaded that even some of the president's detractors had long been reluctant to use it. Fascism was born at the end of World War I in Italy, adopted by Nazis in Germany, and soon became such a widespread word that George Orwell decided the closest synonym to this much abused word was bully. Ever since Trump became the Republican Party standard bearer in 2016, the term's been floated and then dismissed for being too extreme and too alarmist. I was in that camp. Again, I believe everybody, doesn't like somebody and they go, oh, they're fascists. And I'm like, God, y'all you're killing that word. So I was also in the camp of, let's not call Trump a fascist. He might be boorish. He might be authoritarian. There's some stuff he might not understand. And then he might, push past his ignorance with displays of force and, grandiose speeches and such. I didn't think it necessarily made him fascist. A number of books published in 2017 and 2018 essentially told Americans to watch out. The ham-fisted slogans, the crude racism, the lurid nationalism, the venal corruption, all of it could lay groundwork for what historian Timothy Snyder called a confused and cynical sort of fascist oligarchy. So this is problematic. A lot of people have been, quote, blowing the whistle for a while now. The word fascist has acquired a feeling of the extreme, like crying wolf. Not because Americans are so unfamiliar with fascist tactics, but because we are becoming inured to them. Normalization of fascist ideology, by definition, would make charges of fascism seem like an overreaction. And there's the conundrum. Our senses have been dulled by exposure. The United States now has a long history of pro- or proto-fascist sentiment, including the terrorism of the KKK, the America First movement of the interwar years, and the Jim Crow laws that Adolf Hitler cited as an inspiration. Fascism is not a new threat, but rather a permanent temptation. So recently, the Trump campaign put out an America First t-shirt. America First, with a giant eagle clenching a flag. If this looks familiar, it's because this is an old fascist symbol. And there's a quick list here of things that Donald Trump has done to pander to white nationalists and Nazis, both of which are groups to whom fascism appeals. So, while the intent for this image may be unclear in the context of recent rhetoric by the administration and its supporters, it's reason for concern. The circumstantial evidence piling up strongly suggests that individuals within the administration and Trump 2020 campaign are amplifying white supremacist and fascist messaging. Consider that the campaign slogan itself, America First, is a nativist and racist slogan which the Ku Klux Klan actually tried to copyright. Trump's senior political advisor, Stephen Miller, has been called the true driving force behind this administration's racist agenda, and leaked emails from Miller highlight his white nationalist beliefs. The Trump campaign used a concentration camp symbol in a fundraising ad, which is this one. Yes, this is the new anti-Antifa symbol that Trump, blasted out. Yay, Team Trump. Yeah, in case that symbol didn't look familiar. Let's see. Trump campaign used a concentration camp symbol in a fundraising ad. That same ad was posted 88 times, and the first sentence had 14 words. If you don't know what 14 and 88 mean in white nationalist and Nazi lexicon, here you go. 88 is a white supremacist numerical order for Heil Hitler, because H is the eighth letter of the alphabet, and it's used twice, thus 88. Heil Hitler. If you don't know what 14 words means, or 14, the 14 words is a reference to the most popular white supremacist slogan in the world. We must secure the existence of our people and a future for white children. 1488. White nationalism, Nazis, proponents of fascism. During July 3rd, Trump campaign rally stood in front of 14 U.S. flags, referred to the threat of far-left fascism. He then retweeted a video where supporters shouted white power in the first 20 seconds. After the Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville, Virginia, Trump suggested there were, quote, good people on both sides, when one of those sides was made up entirely of neo-Nazis and white supremacists. His constant problem with Trump and his messaging. So I thought I would take a look at what characteristics are of fascism, and then if those are characteristics that Trump and the current Trump administration are drawing people in from. Let's see. Umberto Eco had the You Are Fascism essay, which is probably considered the industry standard in the modern era. This is his list of the 14 attributes, which include the cult of tradition, characterized at the risk of internal doctrination when all truth has already been revealed by tradition. No new learning can occur, only further interpretation and refinement. Rejection of modernism, which views rational development of Western culture since the Enlightenment as a descent into depravity. Cult of action for action's sake, which dictates that action itself is a value and should be taken without intellectual reflection. You know, like building a wall where there's already a wall that doesn't keep people out. Action. Disagreement is treason. Fascism devalues intellectual discourse and critical reasoning as barriers to action. Sound familiar? Just checking. Let's keep moving. Fear of difference, which fascism seeks to exploit and exacerbate, often in the form of racism or an appeal against foreigners and immigrants. Do I need... No. Okay, cool. I can just keep going. Appeal to frustrated middle class, fearing economic pressure from the demands and aspirations of lower social groups. The poors and the blacks are coming for your stuff. Obsession with the plot and hyping of an enemy threat. This often combines an appeal to xenophobia with a fear of disloyalty and sabotage from marginalized groups living within the society, such as the German elite's fear of the Jewish populace, businesses, and well-doings. Woo! Starting to get frightened, people. Starting to get frightened. Number 8, fascist societies rhetorically cast their enemies as, quote, at the same time too strong and too weak. You know, like Schrodinger's Antifa, who is such a leftist beta cuck that patriots will beat them in the street, but also such a source of fear that they should be labeled terrorists and the police should use armed force against them. Kind of like that? Yeah, okay, let's keep going. Pacifism is trafficking with the enemy, because life is permanent warfare. There must always be an enemy to fight, like the dreaded Antifas. Both fascist Germany under Hitler and Italy under Mussolini worked first to organize and clear up their respective countries and build up their war machines that they later intended to use. Didn't Trump say something about wanting to go back and increase our military budget because our military force should be the #1 fighting force in the world, even though our military is already funded more than the next 10 countries' militaries spending combined? Yeah, okay. Contempt for the weak, which is uncomfortably married to chauvinistic popular elitism, in which every member of society is superior to outsiders by virtue of belonging to the in-group. And we keep going. Everybody is educated to become a hero, which leads to the embrace of a cult of death. As Eco observes, the fascist hero is impatient to die. In his impatience, he more frequently sends other people to their death. You know, support the troops, back the blue, go to work for the state, learn how to be armed, you know, with state indoctrination, stuff like that. Machismo, which sublimates the difficult work of permanent war and heroism into the sexual sphere. Fascists thus hold both disdain for women and intolerance and condemnation of non-standard sexual habits, from chastity to homosexuality. Yeah. Selective populism. The people, conceived monolithically, have a common will, distinct from and superior to the viewpoint of any individual. As no mass of people can ever truly be unanimous, the leader holds himself out as the interpreter of popular will. And number 14, newspeak. Fascism employs and promotes impoverished vocabulary in order to limit critical reasoning. Does any of this sound familiar, people? A lot of this, I want to point out, lumps into the popular trope that you hear nowadays of cultural Marxism. They're Marxist, they're Marxist, they're Marxist. In the 1930s, the Nazis in Germany had a trope where they blamed everything on the Bolsheviks. And the Bolsheviks are coming to turn your daughter into a lesbian. The Bolsheviks are coming to turn you into Jews. The Bolsheviks are coming to, people are going to smoke weed. And the Bolsheviks are the problem of everything. And that ended really badly. And so they deemed that to be cultural Bolshevism, anything that was against the mainline authoritarian viewpoint. And they've just now changed that nowadays to cultural Marxism. Same trope, just a different word thrown in there, but essentially the same thing. So what are the takeaways here? Number one, everything you don't like is not fascism. Number two, everybody you don't like is not Hitler. Number three, Trump is definitely a fascist and he's being led by fascists. And he wants to continue turning the country into a fascist dream of white nationalists where there's only one party, one ideology, and anybody who is around to actually criticize him is just some uber intellectual, cultural Marxist who should be ignored and or repressed by the state. I don't know what else to tell y'all. I sat this out for almost 4 years, but sorry, gang, Trump's a fascist.